I never meant to see her outside the clinic. For months she was just a figure in a white coat, moving from chart to chart, her voice clipped but not unkind. Then one Tuesday afternoon, I found her at the corner café, sitting alone with a paperback face down beside her mug. I almost walked past. Almost. The bell above the door caught her attention. Her eyes lifted, not with surprise, but with the sort of weary acknowledgement you give someone you know, but not well enough to smile at. I gave her a nod, the half-awkward kind, and ordered the usual black coffee, 1 sugar. When I turned, she was still looking. "Didn't think you'd be one for places like this?" I said, sliding into the empty chair across from her before I could talk myself out of it. "And what kind of place is this?" she asked. Her voice was lighter than in the exam room, but I noticed the same edge, like she kept parts of herself folded away. I shrugged, fiddling with the sugar packet until it tore unevenly. Too slow, too quiet. She gave the faintest laugh, not enough to shake her shoulders. "That's why I come." Her cup was already cold. I noticed the ring of condensation left behind, her hand resting close to it. She had neat fingers, pale from the early spring chill. I kept my eyes on the mug instead of her face, but the silence stretched in a way that felt deliberate. I asked something small about the book she was reading. She didn't tell me the title, only said, "It's nothing," and flipped it shut. But she left it there on the table, like she wanted me to notice anyway. The cafe clock ticked louder than it should have. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Another message from a friend I hadn't answered in weeks. I didn't pull it out. She was here, and that felt like reason enough. "I don't usually," she started, then stopped. Her eyes flicked toward the door. "Neither do I said, not even sure what I was answering. The barista called someone's name. We both glanced up, then back at each other. She pressed her palm flat on the table, almost like she was steadying herself. I folded the torn sugar wrapper into a small square, then smaller, until it disappeared in my hand. Her hair wasn't like in the clinic, pulled back tight, severe. Here, it fell loose around her shoulders, a streak of silver catching the light when she shifted. I thought about saying it suited her, but the words wouldn't come out right, so I swallowed them with the coffee. "I didn't expect to see you here," she said finally. "And now that you have?" I asked. She let the question hang. No answer, just the faint trace of a smile before she looked away. We sat a while longer, not speaking. The cafe filled with people, then emptied again. When she finally stood, she left her book on the table, just for a second too long, before slipping it under her arm. "Take care," she said. I nodded, and she was gone. On the walk home, I checked my phone. No new messages, just the old ones stacked up like unopened mail. I almost typed something to her. Something harmless, like "nice to see you outside work," but I stopped halfway through and locked the screen. It was nearly midnight when the text came anyway. "I can't believe you came over." I stared at the words, thumb hovering. My reply was short, typed before I could second-guess it. "Then let it happen." The message replayed in my head all morning. By the time I saw her again, it was like nothing had happened. She sat behind her desk at the clinic, hair pinned neatly back, white coat crisp. No trace of the late-night words we'd exchanged. She didn't mention it, and neither did I. Maybe we both decided to leave that moment in the dark where it belonged. But a week later, I found myself carrying groceries up the narrow stairwell of my building. She was unlocking her apartment door at the same time. A surprise I couldn't pretend away. My landlady and my doctor, standing there with a paper bag balanced against her hip. "You live here?" I asked, too blunt. Her smile was tired. "For now. Divorce papers aren't kind to mortgages." I shifted the grocery bag in my arms, unsure what to say. "Sorry," was all that came out. She tilted her head slightly. Don't be. It's just life. You'll learn. She invited me in for tea, half out of politeness, half because the bag in her arms looked heavier than she cared to admit. I followed, trying not to think about how wrong it might look if anyone knew. Her apartment was smaller than I expected. Books stacked along the wall, a kettle already hissing on the stove. She poured 2 mugs, sliding one toward me. Chamomile. No sugar. We sat at the narrow kitchen table, steam fogging the window beside us. For a long time, neither of us spoke. She kept adjusting the handle of her mug, like it mattered which way it faced. I noticed the faint mark where her ring had been. You're quiet, she said finally. I never know what to say to you, I admitted. That earned the softest laugh. Good. Most people say too much. Something loosened between us then. She told me about growing up near the sea, about sneaking out as a teenager to sit on the rocks at night, listening to the waves until her mother came searching with a flashlight. Her voice softened when she spoke, as if remembering made her younger. I didn't tell her much in return, just that I used to write messages on my phone I never sent, just to feel like I'd said something. I stopped short of admitting that I still did it. The silence after that wasn't heavy. It was the kind that asked to be kept. Still, there was a warning underneath. She was twice my age. My doctor. My landlady. Every reason not to linger was stacked neatly in my head. And yet, when she reached across to steady the sugar jar I'd almost knocked over, her hand brushed mine. Just barely, and I felt something shift. She didn't pull away immediately. Neither did I. It was nothing, a moment that could be dismissed. But later, lying awake, I realized I couldn't. I don't know why that moment stayed with me. Maybe because it felt like someone finally saw me. I thought I understood the rhythm of her apartment. The kettle, the hum of the fridge, the soft shuffle of her slippers. But the first time she pulled back, it felt like the floor had shifted beneath me. Started small. A glance held too long. Then she looked away. A laugh that stopped just short of reaching her eyes. The way she arranged the cushions on the sofa like she was putting a wall between us without saying a word. I wanted to ask if I'd done something wrong, but I didn't. Words were too loud, too final. Instead, I lingered in the kitchen while she prepped tea, pretending to inspect the counter. My fingers traced a faint scratch in the wood, tracing it over and over until my thumb went numb. The complication arrived with the mail. Her neighbor, a friend of hers from work, knocked, cheerful, oblivious. She straightened immediately, the weight she'd carried in the room evaporating like steam. I shuffled to the side, unnoticed, watching her greet the visitor. The easy intimacy we'd found dissolved into polite distance, tiny smiles that didn't reach her eyes. Once the door closed, she sighed, leaning back against the counter. I don't know why that always feels like an inspection, she muttered. Inspection? I asked, hesitant. Her shoulders shrugged. Life mostly, people poking, looking too close. I nodded, though I wasn't sure what I agreed to. The silence that followed was thick, like wet wool. I wanted to close the gap between us, but each step forward felt riskier. When she reached for the sugar jar again, our hands brushed. Only a fraction of a second. Only a twitch of fingers. But I caught a spark in that fleeting contact and froze. She froze too, not moving away but not leaning closer either. My mind raced, imagining what could happen if we crossed that invisible line. Her lips close to mine, the heat of her hand against mine, the slow pull of gravity in her gaze. But it was forbidden. Every rational thought whispered stop. I cleared my throat, moving to refill my mug. The liquid rattled softly in the cup. She didn't look at me, her eyes fixed somewhere just beyond the window, distant, unreadable. I wanted to ask her if she felt it too, the tension hanging between us, tangible as steam rising from the tea. But I didn't. Instead, I took a step back, sipping slowly. When she finally spoke, her voice was quiet, almost unsure. "You should go." I nodded, though my body wanted to stay. My hand lingered on the edge of the table for a heartbeat longer than necessary, her gaze catching mine for just a fraction, and then she looked away. We didn't touch again. Not really. But for the rest of the night, when I closed my eyes, I could feel the brush of her fingers, the warmth of her presence beside me, the near kiss that hovered on the edge of something forbidden. And it stayed there, waiting. The park was empty except for a few joggers and the stray wind rattling leaves across the path. I walked beside her, hands stuffed in my hoodie pockets, noticing how the light caught the silver in her hair, how her stride was measured, deliberate. "I didn't mean to seem distant yesterday," she said, not looking at me, voice barely above the rustle of leaves. I shrugged, unsure how to respond. Distant wasn't the word I'd use. More like careful. Too careful. "You don't have to explain," I said. She stopped, turning slightly, her hands curling around the strap of her bag. "But maybe I should." Something tightened in my chest. Every rational thought screamed to stay quiet, to let it pass like the clouds above. But I couldn't. "You don't have to protect me," I said, voice uneven. Her eyes flicked to mine, hesitant. Then she laughed softly, more sad than amused. "Protect you? From what?" From getting involved," I admitted. The words felt cheap, inadequate. My palms itched, my body taut with something I couldn't name. "From this?" I gestured vaguely between us, knowing she'd understand without more. She looked away again, gaze tracing the curve of the park bench ahead. I'm not sure I can control it either," she whispered, almost inaudible. I wanted to reach for her hand, to anchor her to the moment, but I stopped myself. Instead, I let my fingers twitch near mine, close enough to feel the warmth radiating from her without touching. I think I might have been waiting for someone like you," I said, voice low, trembling with hesitation. "Even though I know I shouldn't." Her breath caught. She shifted on her feet, a subtle tremor in the air between us. "Waiting?" she repeated, uncertain, like tasting the word before swallowing it. "You shouldn't." The tension stretched over us like a thin wire. One step closer and it could snap. One word too many, and everything would shift. And yet we lingered. A stray leaf floated down, landing between us on the path. I bent slightly to flick it away, close enough to brush against her wrist. She didn't pull back. "I keep thinking about it," I confessed, my voice barely a whisper. "Thinking about what it would be like if—" I trailed off, unable to finish, but she heard anyway. Her hand twitched at her side. The wind tugged at her hair. She didn't answer, and that silence said more than any words could. We started walking again, slower this time. Every step echoed in the quiet park, each pause stretching longer than the last. I wanted to ask her, wanted to risk it, but the question wouldn't come. Instead, it hovered, unspoken, fragile. And for a moment, I thought maybe she felt it too, the pull, the impossibility, the quiet, aching curiosity. Then she glanced at me, eyes unreadable, and smiled faintly. "Are you going to say it?" I froze, the world narrowing to that single, soft question, waiting for an answer neither of us could give yet. I stopped seeing her for a few days, not because I wanted to, but because I didn't know how to stay present without crossing a line. Each morning, I told myself I'd go by, check the mailbox, maybe say hi, but something in me hesitated, a quiet voice reminding me of all the reasons I shouldn't. Then she started pulling away. Small things first. A delayed reply to a text, a distracted smile when I entered the clinic. The same eyes that had once lingered on mine now flicked past, scanning the room, unreadable. One afternoon, she asked me to help with a broken shelf in her apartment. I showed up, toolbox in hand, and found her sitting on the floor, legs crossed, staring at the wood with a strange kind of exhaustion. "I haven't been sleeping well," she said, almost as if admitting it for the first time. I didn't ask why. Some questions felt too heavy to voice. Instead, I knelt beside her, helping to align the boards. My hands brushed hers once, accidentally, and she flinched, just slightly, but enough to make the air crackle. "You have a kid, right?" I asked, voice low, careful. Something I'd been avoiding, knowing it would complicate everything. She froze. The tool I was holding slipped from my grasp. "I didn't think it mattered," she said finally, quiet, not meeting my eyes. The shelf waited half-assembled between us, unfinished, like our conversation. I nodded slowly. "It matters," I admitted. "To me, anyway." She looked at me then, really looked, and I saw the hesitation I'd glimpsed before but had tried to ignore. Age, responsibility, history, everything piled up in the spaces between our words. For the next few days, we drifted. I imagined scenarios I didn't dare voice. Her calling me over late at night, me leaving after hours of quiet conversation, us laughing at something insignificant. Each thought ended before it started, leaving me restless, hollow. A message appeared on my phone I didn't know how to answer. "Can we not do this right now?" I stared at it for hours. Part of me wanted to type, "I can wait." Another part knew that typing anything at all might break the fragile line we'd been walking. So I didn't. That evening, I walked past her apartment. The door was closed. The hall was quiet. I wanted to knock. I wanted to lean against the frame and just watch her appear. But my hand stayed at my side. I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt paused, like life forgot to finish the sentence. Her chair sat empty when I peeked inside the café the next morning. Tea untouched. A newspaper folded back just so. She wasn't there. And somehow, knowing she might have been and wasn't made the room colder than I expected. I left without ordering, leaving a coin on the counter. For her. For me. For nothing at all. And I walked away, letting the unresolved tension hover over the street like a shadow I couldn't shake. The door clicked behind me. She was in the kitchen, sleeves rolled up, chopping vegetables with a precision I could never match. The scent of garlic and onions filled the small apartment, familiar, grounding. I lingered by the doorway, unsure if I should speak or retreat. Every rational thought reminded me of the boundaries I'd crossed, the line I shouldn't even consider touching. But my feet didn't move. She glanced up, eyebrows raised, and for a moment her expression was unreadable. Then she smiled faintly, not a big smile, not a dramatic one, just a small, human acknowledgement. "You came," she said, voice low, calm. "I wasn't sure I should," I admitted, stepping closer. My hands fumbled in my pockets. The words caught in my throat, halfway between confession and hesitation. She set the knife down and leaned against the counter. "You don't have to explain. Not everything needs words." I wanted to say everything. I wanted to tell her about the nights I imagined this, her here, me close, our hands brushing over the cutting board. I wanted to admit the pull, the weight of wanting her, and the guilt that came with it. But instead, I exhaled and let the silence stretch. She reached for the tea kettle, her fingers brushing mine briefly. A simple contact, yet it carried the gravity of all the unsaid things between us. I felt my chest tighten, not with desire exactly, but with the fear of losing this delicate balance we'd been circling. I shouldn't be here," I said finally, almost to myself. Her eyes softened, scanning my face. "Maybe you should," she whispered, barely audible. as if testing the limits of what was safe to admit. We moved around each other in the small kitchen, making tea, arranging cups, and in that quiet motion, the weight lifted slightly. I watched her hands fold over the handle of her mug, the slight tremor when she lifted it to her lips. Everything about her was careful, measured. Everything I wanted to disturb but dared not. I reached over and lightly brushed a strand of hair from her face. She didn't flinch. She didn't smile openly either. Just let it happen. That small contact said more than words ever could. For the first time, I realized the cost of staying silent was smaller than the cost of pretending nothing existed. "Okay," she said softly, almost to herself. Not a declaration, not a promise, just a quiet acknowledgement that we were here, together in the same space, with everything fragile and real. I nodded. "Okay." We sipped the tea in silence, letting the room hold us. Nothing dramatic, no loud confessions, just two people leaning into the same quiet, fragile space. And somehow it felt like enough. It wasn't sudden. There was no cinematic moment or dramatic confession. Life simply continued, shifting in the quiet ways that made the world feel lived in and real. I arrived at the café at 8:47 a.m., just like always. She was already there, black coffee in hand, eyes on the small notebook she carried everywhere. I slid into the seat across from her without a word. She glanced up, a flicker of recognition in her gaze. No grand smiles, just a small nod. That was enough. Some mornings we didn't speak at all. We shared tea or coffee or a pastry, our hands occasionally brushing as we reached for the sugar or the stirrer. Tiny, careful touches that meant everything and nothing at once. Occasionally, we took walks in the park. The same bench we'd passed on that late afternoon now felt like ours. No words were necessary. I could feel her presence beside me, the same way she could sense mine without needing to explain. Her apartment, once a place of tension and near confessions, became a sanctuary of ordinary life. I'd carry groceries up the stairs. She'd tell me about her day or read an excerpt from a book she loved. Sometimes she'd pause mid-sentence, glance at me, and we'd laugh quietly, sharing the kind of silence that had taken months to learn. Evenings were simpler. She poured the tea. I stirred sugar or milk. The clink of spoon against cup, the steam rising between us, the comfortable rhythm of being. These were the things that mattered. Not the passion of a storybook, but the ache of recognition, the gentle gravity of two lives overlapping without fanfare. There were still reminders of why this could be complicated. Her past, my youth, the world outside our little routines. But we learned to let them exist without letting them define us. The guilt, the hesitation, the near misses. They became part of the landscape, like shadows that softened as the day went on. One morning, I noticed her looking out the window, cup half empty, hair catching the early light. She smiled faintly, almost imperceptibly. I realized she was thinking the same thing I was. This quiet, ordinary life was enough. Not perfect, but ours. I reached across the table and rested my hand near hers, not needing to take it, not needing her to say anything. She didn't move, didn't pull away. We simply existed in that small space, the unspoken understanding between us saying everything we couldn't put into words. And for once, I didn't feel the need to fill the silence. That's how it ended, or rather, how it continued. The bench, the coffee, the 8:47 a.m. routine, the fleeting touches, the shared glances, all became the quiet markers of a love that was earned, lived, and carried gently forward. Only we would understand it. Did this story stay with you? What kind